Hey guys, just a heads up, this episode is a bit of a doozy. As you know, here on ODIN, we're trying to save the world by exploring tricky issues and having healthy discussions about them. And this topic is a tricky one. And although the discussion was healthy, it was also profane and confusing. So bear with us on this one. This is officially your trigger warning. Hope you enjoy.
Hello everyone and welcome to Odin, open dialogue and ideas and news. Today we have the most of the OG cast with us, Blake, Max, Rich, myself, and Guzal. And we also have two new members. First is Sophia.
Hi, I'm Sophia. I'm 22. I'm a senior in the EPP, the Environmental Policy and Planning program, and I'm about to graduate.
I'm Caleb, I'm 21, I'm a junior, and I'm a major in International Public Policy and Russian language.
So one of the reasons we got together today was to discuss the idea of toxic masculinity as a whole. It seems to be sweeping the nation, and I'm sure you don't want every college kid's 2 cents on the Gillette ad, but I think that's a great jumping off place. Guzal, you had some questions?
So, this is actually episode 2 of our overall discussion about this topic. In episode 1, we began with what we thought about the Gillette ad, and I think that would be a great place to start today as well, to see what the new members thought of it. Sophia, what was your reaction to the advertisement?
So originally I had started seeing a lot of talk about it on like Twitter and just social media in general. And a lot of people were really upset, so I decided to check out the ad. And basically, like, from what people were saying, I was expecting to just see some, like, drastic, like, men in full drag, like, shaving, or, I don't know, just, like, something that's more kind of, like, taboo to, like, have in just mainstream media. And when I actually saw the ad, I was really surprised because a lot of the stuff that they showed was what I would figure to be, like, common, like, good things to do, and so I was just confused as to why people were so upset about it, but that's just my take.
Which parts did you think were good to do? Like,
well, like, breaking up fights, like,
okay.
And, like, when they're stopping, like, the guy from interacting with the girl, like, stuff like that.
So
just,
we
like,
all agree, like,
interactions.
you shouldn't be, like, hitting women, right?
Yeah.
Is that, like, can we agree on that?
I think it's a consensus that sexual assault and rape and abuse of women is bad.
Yeah.
But the overall message is also just asking men to be better.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's a bad message at all. Caleb, what did you think?
I mean, I was just kind of confused why people were upset about the ad. They just acted like, I mean, there was like a political timing of the ad, but people were so, like, stuff like that is just so unnecessary to get that angry about. It's like when Nike did the Colin Kaepernick ad and people just started burning their shoes. Like, I saw a tweet.
You already paid for it.
Yeah, like, I don't know. I mean, they're just a razor company. They're just making a commercial, and it just, like, at the end of the day, like, just, I mean, all I was saying is just be, like, a nicer person in general. Like, it wasn't, like, this forcing of, like, a liberal agenda down your throat, I guess. It was just, like, don't grab women's ass in public. Like,
Yeah. General. I think we all agree on that stuff, though, right? Like, most people, is that really a problem?
Well, I think a lot of the problem arises from there are still a lot of people out there who do think it's okay to sexually assault women, or don't regard some of their actions as being sexual assault, or don't realize, the harm behind some of their actions. And I think that a general consensus from the discussion last time was that a lot of the main themes of the ad, of basically saying shitty male behavior is shitty, we all agreed were pretty solid, but where there was some dissenting opinions were when the ad was breaking down different areas of masculine behavior and deciding when does that behavior become toxic and when doesn't it. One of the two points that we explored were, one, stop breaking up some kids fighting, some kids, like little kids squabbling. We had some discussion over the value of, kids learning their strength, learning conflict at a younger age. And another main one that we've continued to talk about off air is the scene in which a man, broke away from his friend and went up to go approach a woman on the street, and his buddy stepped in and was like, dude, not cool. And Rich, I know that you had a reaction to that when we were talking about him. Tell me what you were thinking about that.
Yeah, so beyond the fact that I think the ad in general is trying to paint in every scene, it's obviously assumed that the men in those scenes are toxic or something, because that's kind of the message they're trying to push. But for me, I thought it was just very strange to see a commercial openly praised where a man is walking up to a woman and his friend stops him from approaching her and says, whoa, dude, you're going to talk to this girl? Not cool. And I know a lot of the people who watch the ad assume because of his manner, he had his arms crossed and he had some swagger and charisma about him. He's, flexing all his alpha-ness or whatever. And that's fine, honestly. And it seems to be a trait that people actually value. But in the commercial, it can easily, it can be characterized. Or what's the character?
Characterized is
characterized. You could take it and make a character, whatever that is, out of it. But it's not necessarily bad, and it's not necessarily not okay to introduce yourself to someone on the street. And it obviously, maybe coming in from behind is a little strange, but it's not bad. And I think if you see someone, like, maybe that's the one. What if, the person, someone walks by and she just is absolutely stunning, and you go, wow, I need to talk to this girl. I just want to say hi. And nowadays that's seen as something strange. And that's just, it deeply bothers me that that's not normal anymore.
He hasn't even performed any physical action at all, and we're already judging his actions based on just his mannerisms as being a negative thing.
I understand what you guys are saying, and I don't think that it's the issue, like, if a guy is trying to talk to a girl, but I think it becomes an issue when it's in the wrong context. So if you're, like, walking down the street, you're walking down that street because you're trying to get somewhere else. If you're, like, in a situation, like, at a party or, like, at a social event where you're, like, openly trying to meet, like, other people, stuff like that, then I feel like it makes perfect sense for someone to come up and talk to you. But just, like, the fact that he, like, saw her walk by, he, like, doesn't know anything about her, like, he doesn't know what she's into, like, anything, but he's just like, oh, like, I want to talk to her because she looks good, which, like, is not a bad thing. It's just, it's the incorrect time and place for him to just think that he can go approach her and stop her day.
I think what we're identifying here is sort of where we left off on the last podcast, is we're identifying that there's a difference in how men and women interact in, say, a professional setting, really in non-sexual settings, versus in the sexual dynamic. And how guys exhibit their masculinity is going to be different in those different settings. However, culturally, we haven't driven all of those lines. We haven't figured out when is it appropriate for a guy, to be approaching a girl or flirting with a girl. And right here, we've already identified between two people a difference in opinion as to what is an appropriate sort of climate for that and not. And I think that that's where a lot of the reaction to this video comes from. A lot of the negative reaction is that we haven't figured out a lot of these boundaries. And the video, maybe not entirely the video, but there on the left particularly, there are strong movements to sort of, I perceive that there are movements that are trying to decide these things or saying that this is how it should be, when I don't know that culturally we've figured all these things out.
I have a question. So yesterday I was at D2.
There's a buffet at Virginia
There's
Tech.
a buffet, yeah, it's a buffet, all you can eat buffet. I go to the gym and stuff, so I go to this place because you can eat as much as you want. So
I work out, bruh.
Yes. Protein.
Yeah, gotta get the chicken breast and the broccoli, of course. No, but I'm there and I'm going over to get my little. They had these tacos with beef in them, and so I was gonna go get one. And on the way, there's this girl, very attractive woman, right? And she's getting a salad. And so that means she's healthy. She's got tan skin, which means like she eats vegetables and fruits.
Is that what that means?
Like, when you have more saturated skin, it's based on your vitamin and mineral intake a lot of the time, so you look healthier. Yeah.
Your membership's at
Eat your
intensity,
so it's
but okay.
like you actually start to take on a healthy look that like people are attracted to.
Blake
And
always
so she's
tells me
very
when I'm
attractive.
eating my carrots. He always
Isn't-
points it out.
He always-
Doesn't that
He's
come
carrots.
from
Damn, dude, you're looking
tanning?
good.
though?
It's
both. It's
Maybe
both.
It comes from
maybe the
tanning.
fact
It
that
comes from
she's
tanning.
tan might mean that she's actually superficial and trying to
Yeah,
look
but
good for
of
other
course.
people
Wait.
by
But it's a
Hang
sign
on,
of
hang on.
tanning.
it's a sign of
Blake,
health.
Keep going with your.
Yeah, keep
So
going.
it's a sign of health nonetheless. Even if she is tanning, that's still a sign of high vitamin D levels. And so there's a reason your skin turns darker because it's more attractive. Higher levels of all the nutrients we need. Okay? So she's very healthy. She's beautiful. And she's got this scarf around her that was depicting an image that I'm familiar with, and it has big significance to me, right? And so I'm like, this is somebody who I can relate to. I already know that this is somebody who is interested in similar things to me because they're getting a salad. Not a lot of people eat salad. They've got some image on their scarf that is,
What was
something
the
I
image?
resonate
What was the
with.
image?
So I go, it's just it's a stripe pattern. It's like a piece of, I know that sounds vague. It's like a certain piece of artwork
Okay.
that, you'd have to see to
Stripes.
recognize. I don't know who did it, right?
No, I've
Okay.
But it's
Carrot.
stripes. That's pretty. That's
Continue.
pretty vague. So she had stripes. Yeah, of course. It's all good, bro. We good? So it had stripes. I wanted to talk to this person. We have something in common. I'm attracted to her. Is that okay? Like you say, people are going about their day, and there's a time and a place to talk to people, like at a party, right? Of course, that's a social setting. But if I see somebody who, I'm attracted, I can go approach her, right? Like,
Yeah, of course. And
okay.
you can do it to an extent as up until when she makes it clear that the attention is unwanted. But also in those types of situations, it's impossible to tell sometimes because she might just be really polite and just answer and socialize and speak because she doesn't want to come off as rude. So that's also, I think, one of the lines we're trying to establish because it's unclear. It's a half and half between the female population, I think. Some would love that because we all like attention and affection and caring, but the other side might say, I was so busy, I was just trying to get my food and I was trying to go, and this guy was just talking to me for no reason and he was just taking up my time. But at the end of the day, it depends on her, but it would be really hard for you to decide.
I think that this is why a lot of guys, it's a real challenge for guys to figure out how to utilize their masculinity, if you will, in the world. And the trait that we're sort of describing here is, what's the trait?
Kind of like that confidence, like taking
initiative,
the fir-
confidence, all of that. Is that it can be very unclear to guys, like, when is it cool to go up? When is it cool to go up and talk to someone? And I think that we're raised in a culture where it's very, very frightening. It's very, very frightening to be perceived as being creepy, be perceived as making someone uncomfortable. And there's a lot out there in the media, the Gillette ad being an example, that generally portrays it is not okay to go up to and do.
And that's why
It depends on your intentions, though. Given that, Blake, from the situation you described, your intentions were pure. You were just trying to make conversation. You were just trying to meet a person that you thought had similar interests. I think that would be fine. But I believe they were trying to show us in the Gillette ad was like a predatory movement. He wasn't trying to meet her because they had similar interests or because she was wearing a scarf that they understood
Stripes.
mutually. Stripes that they understood. He from a certain angle, it looked like he saw her physical body, thought it was attractive, and like he wanted a piece of it.
Yeah.
So he was just trying to go after her.
Yeah,
Well,
it was kind of
That's
like
how
that,
it came off as to me.
So then the question is, can we draw lines of action? Like, should he not be allowed to make those movements? Should he not be allowed to make the noises that came out of his mouth?
Yes.
No, I think it goes deeper than that. I think you need to, like, evaluate yourself, not yourself, like men in general just need to like evaluate like their thought process, and just like learning any type of behavior, like unlearning any type of behavior, it comes from like recognizing when it's going too far. So
Sure. So was he going too far when he was leaning up against a wall and then made
let
the
me finish.
movements? Sure, yeah.
So it's like, obviously you're gonna see people that you think are attractive, but it's like when you start seeing them and you're like I'm gonna go get that type of thing, and it's like it's the wrong setting. So I think like what you're describing as like the frustration of not knowing when it's okay to talk to someone, not wanting, like that fear of not wanting to be perceived as creepy, it's like,
Oh, I want to be perceived as creepy. Trust me,
it's
that's
like,
my goal.
are you doing something that is gonna be creepy? Like if
Yeah.
you're talking to her in D2 in like the line of food, like if you guys are in line like in back of each other, you go like, oh my gosh, hey, like your scarf is cool, like I that it resonates with me. She'll probably be like, okay, yeah, and like move on with her day. Like if she turns back around, then that's it. Like don't pursue it any further. But if it's like you go up to her and you keep like talking to her, like at one point it's gonna cross that line into being uncomfortable for her. So it just comes to like, it begins in like your own head, and just like recognizing, reading body language, recognizing like the environment around you, the context. So like if somebody's walking away from you, like if you're talking about, oh, like it could have been the one, that type of thing. If it's the one, chances are they're probably not going to be walking away from you. Like if it's the one, I think the universe would probably bring them towards you. So
I think
just keep that in mind.
one of the reasons that this ad struck such a chord, and especially with me, and I'm sure with men in general, is for a really long time we've been told what's not okay. We keep getting told that this is bad, this is bad, this is bad, but we've never, I'm not going to say never, but we are rarely given examples of what is okay, what is positive masculinity.
They did give us examples of that in the ad, though.
In the ad, I don't know. I
They
mean,
give
I
us
do
as
agree.
many positive examples
Maybe we
as they
should
did negative.
Throw the ad away. I think the ad was a great catalyst for like talking about this stuff. But now Rich is asking, okay, what can we do?
Because as society in general, and I do agree they added a couple parts, like breaking up the actual bullying going on. I do disagree with the man who broke up the two kids roughhousing, because that's what kids do. They play, and it's actually very important to growing up and learning how to use your body. Anyways, we're rarely given that, and we're constantly told that this is not okay. And we give it, we see this example of this man approaching the girl, and to you, that's not an okay environment to introduce yourself to her. To me, I thought that was okay. I don't know, and there's nobody saying what is all right. And we're in this culture where the lines are so blurry everywhere that we just seem to default to not even interacting.
And I think that's what's frightening to me. What's frightening to me and a lot of the guys that I interact with we're trying to become men and sort out our masculinity is it feels like the alternative often to not going up to, the alternative to not going up to and approaching people and not taking that risk and knowing that you might make them a little bit uncomfortable, that the situation might not go swimmingly, you might get rejected, all of that. The alternative to that is not approaching people, not talking to people, to relegating the sexual dynamic entirely to bars, entirely to parties, which I don't know that I think that the only time that men and women should be courting each other is when they're drunk, And, man, so
I think it just really depends on your intentions, like on the man's intentions. As long as it's not completely based on physical
So is a man
appearance
allowed
and
to see a
sexuality.
girl and then
is
want to
that
have
not
sex with
okay?
her and then try to?
that's kind of my question.
Is it okay for men to see a girl, want to have sex with her, and then try to?
Seriously.
As long as
I
you don't
mean,
like.
Is that
Until-
okay?
I mean, if
Just
you
make sure you like ask her, like
Yeah, like
But
if she's okay with it,
That
though.
could be taken as creepy, though.
well, not like literally
But what
be
if
like,
she's okay
hey, want to
with it?
fuck, but
No,
But
yeah.
the whole aspect of courtship is the eventual possibility of having sex with that person.
you guys,
I mean, yeah.
not to like gang up on you guys, but you've described a couple times that like the intentions being pure, the intentions being okay, versus the guy being like, ooh, she looks hot, I'm gonna go up and talk to her. the fact of the matter is, if a guy's approaching a girl that he sees as a sexual romantic
He
prospect,
probably thinks
it's because she's attracted.
Yeah.
Because he's attracted to her, and that is an inevitable aspect. And I don't think we can,
No, I'm not saying like don't go up to somebody that you think is attractive. I'm saying like just don't go like it's. How do I put it? I don't want to like offend anybody, but it's just kind of like
what it's made for.
the it's kind of like guys get compared to dogs a lot, and it's because it also depicts like women as kind of like a bone or like a steak or something like that. It's like it's not, oh hey, like I want to like cuddle up with this person, or like I want to build a life with them. Like I'm like going like way too far, but the point is like it comes to like your intentions is like, are you trying to have like a one night stand? Like it doesn't matter what your intentions are in that sense. Like if you want to have sex with someone, that's not an issue. The issue is like when it becomes about you're thinking selfishly, is like I want to have sex with that person, meaning like
I'm gonna make it happen.
Yeah, like objectifying it, kind of like you're thinking about yourself in that sense.
Okay, so now we're now establishing a set of morals that people are to abide by. So this is kind of religious in a sense.
Morals do
like
not
laws.
equate to
This is
religion.
where philosophy comes in.
Yeah, but that's a fact. Morals does not equal religion.
How you ought to act in the world is a guideline, a principle of thoughts, right?
you can have a moral code without a religion. But I think the point that you're making is that what you're describing is a moral system about what is okay and not okay in somebody's intentions in going up to and approaching someone. You have more on that?
Yeah, it's like some guys out there want to have sex with a woman one time, and
some girls out there want to have sex with a guy, one time too. I think we're identifying one of the frustrating areas in culture that I feel like guys, we don't know how to operate, or we feel as that culture is putting a lot of pressure on us to remove sexuality from how we interact with women. And I think that that's wholly appropriate a lot of the time in the workplace, things like that. But the idea of trying to remove sexuality from a guy wanting to approach to and talk to a girl doesn't make any sense. It is an inevitable aspect. That is the underlying motivation, unless the guy is like, oh, that person looks like I want to be friends with them. But if the guy is going over to start a romantic sexual interaction, that is the motivation, or at least a major aspect of the motivation.
But we're not asking men to completely take sexuality out of the picture. We're just saying don't perceive women as a piece of meat. See them as an individual, as a whole human being with every single characteristic.
Especially with that one clip. I mean, he just kind of ogles her and just starts chasing after her. So I mean, I don't know.
It's kind of like going off of what you're saying. I think what I'm trying to say that about the intentions is like there needs to be a thought process in between that. Oh, I see her and she's attractive and I want to do something about it. It shouldn't be like a reaction like every time you see someone that's attractive. Like every time you see a female that's attractive, your reaction shouldn't be like, oh, I need to approach her. Like there needs to be that. Just have like a thought process. Like, okay, let me just think about this. Does this make sense? And if it like does make sense, like, okay, yeah, it looks like I can approach her. Like she doesn't have her headphones in, like she's not studying, she's not doing something that she's like focusing on, then I mean, yeah, like I would approach her. I don't think that's an issue. And then responding to what you're saying,
she's pointing at Max, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. Responding to what Max was saying about this trend in removing sexuality from all interactions, I think that comes from just a historical interaction between men and women in different situations where power is involved. And I think that that's a really big thing in sex and just like in interactions in general. It's very political and it's very like centered around power. And the reason that there's such a push for removing sexual interactions or just like sexuality in the workplace, like in other interactions, is because, I'm sorry to say it, but like men like haven't handled it well. Like if things had gone like well and dandy, like if like women weren't feeling pressured to have sex with like their bosses, like stuff like that, then it wouldn't have been taken away. But it's kind of like this, like, I'm not saying it's anyone's fault, but like our whole generation, like we've kind of been born into this situation where like it's like our parents, our grandparents, they created this society. And so I really understand like your frustration, like we don't know how to act because our whole lives we've been told like this is wrong, and we don't really know like why, because we haven't been in that situation yet.
I want to stress real quickly that in most situations in the workplace, in when there is a power dynamic and things like that, I think we're all really in support of, you know, removing the sexual dynamic from those inappropriate situations. Where I'm concerned about is the fact that sexuality is an inevitable and fundamental part of the human condition, the human experience. And I think that exactly what you're describing, as we're entering this new world where we're trying to fix a lot of those old mistakes, old really harmful towards women things, it leaves a lot of, there's these sticky issues where sexuality is still a part of humans. And so where is an appropriate place to act? And guys, we do not have really much in the way of role models, much in the way of education towards the nitty gritty of approaching women, talking to women, courtship, and all that. And that's sort of what I want to highlight and explore, is that just as you were saying, Rich, guys, for the most part, we are not taught positive role models. We're not given positive examples of how to appropriately approach a woman, say on the street or in the cafeteria or something like that. And so we have to figure it out for ourselves. And it's very challenging.
It's tough because, like you mentioned, that testing process might make someone uncomfortable because interactions can become awkward. You walk up to a good girl, and not a good girl, an attractive girl, and you forget all the words that you know. You're like, I can speak English? No, I can't. And it could be strange, and you're like, damn, maybe next time. But beyond that, what I noticed is interesting, and this thought kind of popped up in my head as you were talking, was it seemed like in our grandparents' generation, the idea of masculinity was like, be a man. Like, it was pushed heavily to the point where I think a lot of, men had to repress their feminine side, which was kind of sad. But now it seems like the pendulum has swung completely in the other direction, where we seem to take the masculine traits and associate them with all the negative parts, because masculinity has two sides. It has its tyrannical aspect, the power dominance, that sort of thing. But it also has the ability to push society forward, to defend your country, to create technological innovations, to, I guess in a sense, the masculine principle is a principle that moves forward archetypally. And I just think that we're only seeing the negative side of that nowadays. And I wish there was a spot where the pendulum would kind of just hang in the middle, where we could have more positive role models like you discussed.
I don't know if I completely agree that the pendulum has swung completely to the other side, because as we mentioned in the last episode, a really attractive male trait is just confidence and just going out and doing it and being a go-getter. And that is still something that women are extremely attracted to and love. And that is an example that men have as a good trait, just not to the point where it's overbearing. A lot of guys ask girls, what do you look for in a significant other, or what do you find attractive about guys? And I'm pretty sure for most of the female population, or most of the girls that I've interacted with, it's one of the first things they mention is confidence. That has not been downplayed at all. It's just, there's a difference between arrogance, cockiness, and confidence, where it's paired with respect.
I have to disagree with you actually pretty strongly on that. And guys, you can back me up or not depending on your experience. But there's confidence is one thing, but sexual confidence is another thing. Having the confidence to go up to a girl and say she looks really good, or to inject sexual tension into conversation and flirt and all of those. Those are skills that I agree women are attracted to. But culturally, lots of guys have been raised and conditioned to think that talking with a girl and expressing anything really sexual is bad. That will make you be creepy, and that's how we're sort of, a lot of guys that I've spoken to and how I've felt growing up is conditioned that stuff is bad. And then you're exactly right. When you actually go out into the world and find that that's what girls are attracted to, it can feel like there's this conflicting narrative that I think is what pushes a lot of guys towards that toxic masculinity, is that they see a conflict between what culture has told them and what women are actually interested in, if that makes any sense.
But you brought sexuality into you paired it with the confidence, and I don't think that has to be together at all. Confidence just means knowing what you're doing, where you're going, what you want to do, having set goals, and being completely secure in yourself in the actions you carry out in the world. It doesn't have to do with sexuality at all.
In a flirting dynamic, if a guy never moves things forward, never makes a move, never injects something sexual into the conversation, never begins physical contact, things often don't move forward. It is culturally the responsibility of guys to be initiating and moving things forward. That's what I talk about when I mean sexual confidence.
But there's a time and place.
Yes.
Wait, sorry.
Absolutely, yeah.
I want to go off of what you're saying because it made me think about something that I've noticed a lot, and then it's that who makes the first move, and it goes back to this power political dynamic with just sex in general, who makes the first move, or who has sex with who kind of thing. I don't know, who gets fucked in the situation. It comes down to who is winning and who is losing, and that's what I think is a lot of what it comes down to in a lot of these interactions is who wants to make the first move. People are afraid to get played, you're afraid to get made fun of, you're afraid to be perceived as creepy. There's all these things, because at the end of the game, it's at the end of the day, it becomes a mind game. You're trying to figure out what the other person is thinking, you're trying to achieve some sort of goal. There's an agenda for both people, and at the end of the day, I feel the best policy is just to be honest, instead of trying to be calculative and trying to think, oh, what's the best thing I could say right now to make this happen. Just be honest, this is what I'm thinking, this is what I'm planning to do. Are you on the same page? Are you not on the same page? Can we find a middle ground? That type of thing.
So talk about...
I can see where that's confusing for men, though, because talking about it is also a turn off for a lot of girls. Hey,
why would you talk
I'm
about
gonna kiss
it?
you, and then lean in.
Hey, is it okay for me to touch your arm?
Yeah.
Is it okay for me to kiss you?
Clarify.
Can I stare into your eyes? Is that right?
I was talking about sex.
Okay.
That's it. You want...
But it is everything that leads up to that is more the issue.
Well, you don't have to talk about I want to hold your hand, but it's if you're talking to someone, you're I find you attractive, I would really like to hang out with you, I'd really like to explore things further with you, are you attracted to me? I feel that's a valid question. And I feel honestly, I feel if you start the conversation like that, it'll probably go well, unless the other person really isn't attracted to you, and then
Could I go back a little bit when you said that everything is a power dynamic and that there's always a winner and a loser? I'm a little confused by that.
I think it comes down to just how sex has been a part of culture since history, I guess, throughout history, and it's always been kind of men using women, women being used as a reproductive incubator, essentially. That's why a lot of times when you see homophobic jokes and it's oh, guys say no homo, is because I feel a lot of traits in masculinity, it's guys don't want to get fucked. So I feel that's a big thing, is the mentality.
Why would you want to get fucked?
Huh?
Why would a guy want to get fucked?
But that's what I'm saying. It's if it's such an issue for someone to I don't know. I feel
I understand.
I'm gonna jump in real quick and say
I'm
that
saying.
as a dude that's bi, some guys are okay with being fucked. You know?
Sure,
no,
that's
I'm
true.
saying, but I'm talking about straight men who view it as such a big thing.
Well, I'm talking more metaphorically. Why would a guy want to get fucked in any situation? Right?
Yeah,
You're saying that you're attracted to men that go through the world and like know what they're doing, right? And have a goal and an aim. And a lot of times guys who do have a goal and an aim have to accrue power in order to accomplish that goal. They have to build corporations. They have to, get groups of people together and move them through the world for like a real purpose, right? And so those people have to fuck some people over if they want to, because the world is not this friendly. It's not you can be generous to everybody, right? But the thing is, like, you have to take some of their power for your purpose. And so that means that those people are going to respect you.
And that's what I'm saying is, like, you're using the terminology, like, you have to fuck people over. Yeah. You have to take their power for your purpose. Yeah. So, like, substitute that in a sexual interaction. Are you taking someone's power for your benefit? That's the mentality that I think that a lot of people are trying to talk about. Yeah.
I think I see a couple things that are taking us in a strange direction.
Yeah, that's true.
First of all, fascinating. I don't think power dynamics are a zero-sum game. I don't think it's a. That's one of the things I really disagree with as a political philosophy is seeing everything through a lens of power, because I think it starts to corrode our seeing each other as people. So I guess to start off with the whole zero-sum game of power, as if there's 100 power and everyone gets like a little bit and you steal from other people, I think we're in a society where we're constantly growing the pie. Our economic benefits have been going up exponentially, and they're going to continue to do so and make the whole world a better place, which is amazing to see. But another thing you said was that traditionally women have always had the short end of the stick when it comes to sexual relations with men, used as like incubators. And I do understand that there was a large time in our United States history and just in general where women were treated like second-class citizens. But I think the mistake we make is that sexual dynamics started with culture, that it's a cultural thing, because humans have been having sex since we were monkeys, right? And we've been doing this for a really long time, assuming you believe in the evolution. But even if you don't, it was pre-culture. And it seems to be almost a physiological thing that we are all involved in. And there was a time and place where it was really important, like when we were growing up in tribes and we had a community of 100 people surrounded by death. As soon as you go in the forest, what's going to happen? You have to find the food for your family. You have to hunt them. And traditionally women stayed back. They generally picked fruits and berries and plants because they didn't have the physical size of the men to kill animals. And the men would go out, come back, and bring the meat. But one of the things I find fascinating was at that period of time, it was important for the women to remain and be the incubators, to take care of the kids, to stay in the village. Why would you send your wife out to hunt lions? She's got to raise the kid. And that was the most important role of human history, was making more humans, furthering human development. That's what we do as a species. And I'm not sure it's a cultural thing.
This I want to jump off of that point because I learned a thing in my anthropology class that's really changed my understanding of the male-female power dynamic, and that was that yes, in prehistory, as you're describing it, men were hunters, women were gatherers. Those were actually very egalitarian societies traditionally. And in the gender dynamic, they tended to be very egalitarian as well. However, as soon as we switch from nomadic hunter-gatherer tribes to being in stationary civilizations where people specialized in order to accrue wealth, women, because they breastfed and were pregnant a lot of the time, were relegated to staying at home and taking care of their kids. So all of the work that they did would go towards just the family unit, whereas men would be out participating in society and interacting with other people. And as a consequence, the work they did, even if both parties were doing equal work, the work that men did would be developing wealth, developing interpersonal dynamics with other people and social status. And that's hypothesized as one of the major reasons why women have spent most of history, as you said earlier, being second-class citizens, being severely marginalized, because the work that they did only benefited the family unit and was not able to go out and affect other people. I just wanted to jump on that point because it's really been transformative for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And I think that a lot of times now it's viewed kind of like taboo for people to want to be stay-at-home moms. I don't think that's an issue at all. Like, I feel like if you want to stay at home with your kids, that should be fine. I feel like that, just like kind of what you were saying, like masculinity is tied to, sorry, I'm pointing at
Rich me.
when he was talking about like the masculinity being tied to advancing society, like technological advances, that stuff like that, it also ties into Max's point about it being like being able to be quantified in terms of wealth, and like what women have done in the past like isn't quantified in terms of wealth, it's quantified like in the success of the family. So I think that masculinity just like begins to become toxic when there's only like a certain segment of the population that can exhibit those traits. Does that make sense?
A certain section of the population that can exhibit those traits.
When women are prevented from being able to explore those traditionally masculine traits, and this is something that we explored on the last podcast in depth. So,
what are we talking about when we say traditionally masculine?
During the last podcast, we also spoke about, we spoke about the invention of the birth control pill and how that has allowed women to essentially be on the same level as men in almost all areas of life. And now it's not really okay for men to continue the same behaviors that they have throughout history and to try to treat women the way they have in the past, because now there's no barrier separating us from being soldiers, going to war, performing all the same work functions, and being...
Do you want to go to war?
I don't want to go to war.
I don't want to go to war either.
No, I'm saying, but you can't discriminate against women like men have in the past anymore, because now we can do all of the things and that you guys are doing, and we are doing them.
I think generally speaking, though, if you went out and polled like 100 people, 100 men, 100 women, a lot more men are going to say, "Yeah, I'll go to war," than women are.
That was an irrelevant point.
Well, I'm saying like that's relevant because a lot of the times men are taking a lot more risks in the world, like in the workplace, all these things. They're taking risk in, to be like in Afghanistan, like shooting people for a living, and they're taking risks to do,
well, yeah, it's going to take a little bit of time for us to catch up, because I don't know, that's been how men have been brought up. Oh, country, fight, and protect. Like, women haven't been brought up on those principles, but now that we are capable of doing the same things.
Do you really think you can do the same things, though? How many, like genuinely asking, how many women could become a Navy SEAL? Do you not think there is a physical barrier to war?
There definitely is a physical difference between women and men, in that women obviously have lower test scores on physical exams and different exercises because of our physical body structure and everything. But I'm saying, even if we perform a little differently and with lower scores, can't do it.
I think what we're exploring here is the principle of equality of opportunity versus equality of outcome. What we're describing here is that, Ghazal, I think what you're talking about is how we now live in a world where women have or should have the opportunity to pursue the paths in lives that used to be restricted to only men.
Yep.
And that there are a lot of hurdles to women being able to do that, and that we should seek to break down those hurdles. I think, Rich and Blake, what you're identifying is that while that is the case, there are still going to be certain facets of culture, certain facets of society that men are going to be either more inclined, roles that men are going to be more inclined to take on, or more effective at taking on.
Yep, that's completely correct. Thanks for
a lot of those
summarizing
ones that
that.
are harder to take on are just happen to be the better paying ones, because they're riskier. They're done in harsher conditions, like working outside or working in, on places that are precarious, maybe in a mine or something like that.
I mean, most professions were dominated by men because women were used to staying at home and just bearing children. So, but now we can do it all.
But I mean, I'm just saying that oftentimes you're not as inclined, just generally speaking, women are not as inclined to do risky things like go into a mine for 30 days at a time and, swing a pickaxe at coal. Like, if you poll the population, most women are not going to want to do that, but men are willing to do that high risk stuff to get higher paying things. And so that's why we see inequality still today, is that there's, still those risky jobs out there. I have a question.
So if you were to take out like that whole mentality that men are supposed to be the breadwinners,
sure,
do you think men would still be as willing to work in those conditions? Because I would argue that like working in a mine, like breathing in like all those chemicals and stuff, like is not an ideal working condition for, especially for the amount like they get paid. Like,
I think that there's one or two things I want to unpack there. The idea that if men are no longer going to be the breadwinners.
No, but I'm not saying they can't.
I know. But if we try and remove that mentality, I think that if it happens, it's going to be a really long time before we change that mentality, because I think women select for men with those traits. Women select for men that are providers, that are willing to take risks, that have those confidence. A lot of these traditionally masculine traits are traditionally masculine because they're the ones that women select for. And I
don't disagree with you. I was just asking him, like, in that situation, do you think it's tied more to that feeling of responsibility and that, like, essentially like that cultural?
I think it's tied to the fact that it gets girls. Honestly, if
we boil it down to like the very core essence,
yeah,
further the human species, that's like everyone's prerogative.
Why do we perform? Because we want a girl, right? I mean, why the hell else perform?
Well, but in a sense, I understand what you're saying. Like, how much of that is the responsibility you feel as a man to be the breadwinner? Is that the question you were asking? Versus if that cultural weight wasn't there to make you do it?
Like, yeah, it's just kind of trying to distinguish between, like, is it an innate trait for guys to, like, want to take on more risk? Or is it a societal pressure to, like, meet these certain expectation that pushes you to taking on more risk?
So when you get down to it, it's like survive and reproduce, right? That's our whole thing.
It does seem to be much.
That's our mantra, right? We just survive and reproduce.
Yeah.
And so why do we do anything we do for those two things?
Okay, now we're getting.
Yeah. Also, testosterone, like risk-seeking behavior, is linked to
That's really interesting.
directly linked to testosterone, which guys have a lot more of. I think that's why we have seen these traditionally masculine traits develop, is because men and women, do have different hormonal balances, and certain traits are linked to those hormones and all that. We're coming sort of up on time. Before we finish off, a thing that we like to do here on ODIN is talk about some actionable solutions for some of the problems that we're exploring. We've covered a lot of ground today, but I'm going to take us back to what we were sort of talking about at the beginning, which is when is it okay for a guy to be approaching a girl, all of the issues that arise from there. Are there any takeaways or conclusions, advice towards really men in this situation or women towards when we cross over from that normal sort of workplace-like neutral ground to the sexual dynamic? How should people go about approaching that in a appropriate way?
I think just be respectful and honest and know when to stop and when to walk away.
Ooh, wow, that was vague. I'm not. That's just a hard.
Just be respectful.
Actionable solution to give, but I guess.
No, go ahead.
Okay, I mean, I think a helpful way is to find a role model, right? There's no. It's one of those things that when you try to use words to explain how it works, you end up coming out with vague generalizations, because you can't really describe like a step-by-step process of how to do these things, because they're so complex and core to being human. But when you can find a role model, someone in your life, it doesn't have to be in your life, but someone who exhibits traits that you would like to see in yourself.
I got a role model for men. Just do everything Barack Obama does.
Ooh.
That's it. Just follow Barack Obama.
That's
where we should end, man. Follow Barack Obama to the end, baby.
Max, did you?
I wanted, just jumping off of that, my advice would be to people, and this is a recurring bit of advice from the podcast in general, is to talk to your friends. For guys particularly, find guy friends that are, interested in learning how to approach women and all that. you'll find that lots of guys are. And discuss this with them, but be open. And when I say discuss, I mean, like, don't be afraid to get deep, talk about your insecurities, all these things, because that's how you approach and get better at it. It's by having discussions like this one. Rich and Blake and I have conversations about this kind of stuff all the time, and that's where I feel like I've learned the most. Also, talk to women about this kind of thing.
Yeah, talk to us, ask us.
Yeah, and I think that's how we figure things out, is by having open dialogue about ideas and news. Listen to our podcast.
Thank you very much, everyone.
For more information on ODIN, check out our social media linked in the description below. If you'd like to attend a discussion, check us out on Facebook. We frequently update our events there. If you'd like to start a show or pitch a topic, send us an email at odinspeak@gmail.com. That's ODIN speak@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.